The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship Sentinel. Captain James Reed stood from his command chair, his weathered face reflecting the pulsing emergency lights. The distress signal from Colony 7 had come without warning, cutting through the usual calm of deep space patrol. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice steady despite the worry in his eyes. The message crackled through the ship's speakers, broken and filled with static. "Emergency. Colony 7. Children. Taken. Help." Then nothing but silence. Reed turned to his crew, each face showing the same concern he felt. "How long until we reach the colony?" 2 hours at maximum speed, Captain," answered Lieutenant Wilson from the pilot's seat. Her fingers were already moving across the controls, plotting the fastest course. "Make it 90 minutes, Reed said. "Push the engines if you have to." The Sentinel cut through space like an arrow, its powerful engines glowing bright against the darkness. Colony 7 was one of the newer settlements, home to 300 families who had moved to the frontier seeking a better life. Reed had visited just 2 months ago for a routine check. He remembered the children playing in the artificial parks, their laughter echoing through the colony's domes. When they arrived, the sight made even the most seasoned crew members catch their breath. The colony's main dome was intact, but the smaller structures around it showed signs of forced entry. No bodies lay in the streets, no signs of violence, just an eerie emptiness that felt wrong in every way. "Life signs?" Reed asked as they docked at the main airlock. Officer Kate Miller checked her scanner. Multiple readings inside the main dome. All adult patterns. "But the numbers are wrong, Captain." She looked up, her face pale. "We're missing about 50 signatures. All the readings matching children under 14 are gone." Reed led the search team himself. They found the adults in the colony's main hall, many still dazed from what appeared to be some kind of stun weapon. Dr. Thompson, the colony's leader, could barely speak through his tears. "They came without warning," he managed to say. "Ships we'd never seen before. They used some kind of gas. We couldn't stop them. They only took the children. All of them." As the medical team treated the colonists, Officer Miller found the first real clue. In the colony's security center, a camera had captured images of the attackers. Tall, slender figures in environmental suits, moving with an unsettling grace. Their ships bore markings that the computer took hours to identify. "Captain," Miller called, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You need to see this." Reed looked at the screen, where the computer had finally matched the markings to existing records. The word collectors flashed alongside a warning notice from other alien races. "They're known in some parts of the galaxy," Miller explained, reading through the data. "They show up without warning, take what they want, and vanish. But they've never hit human colonies before. They're supposed to be preservationists of some kind." Reed's hand tightened on the back of Miller's chair. "Get me Earth Command. Now." As the communication was being established, Reed looked at the photos parents had shared of their missing children. Happy faces, innocent smiles. Dreams and futures suddenly interrupted. "Sir," Miller said softly, "what do we do?" Reed's voice was cold and determined when he answered. "We find them. Every single one. And we show these collectors why taking human children was the worst mistake they could have made." The message to Earth Command was brief but clear. Colony 7 attacked. All children taken. Unknown species identified as collectors responsible. Request immediate authorization for pursuit and rescue operation. The response came faster than anyone expected, carrying the authority of every human government. Authorization granted. All resources at your disposal. Find our children. Show no mercy to those responsible. The hunt was about to begin. Officer Kate Miller hadn't slept in 36 hours. The walls of her small office aboard the Sentinel were covered with holographic displays, each showing different pieces of information about the collectors. Her eyes burned from staring at the screens, but she couldn't stop. Not while those children were out there somewhere. A soft knock on her door made her look up. Captain Reed stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, placing 1 cup on her desk. "Tell me you found something." Miller nodded, taking a quick sip of the hot coffee. "I did, sir, but you're not going to like it." She waved her hand, and the displays rearranged themselves. Images of similar incidents from other worlds filled the screens. Different species, different places, but always the same pattern. "The collectors have been doing this for at least 50 years, she explained. "They've taken young ones from 12 different species. But here's the strange part. They think they're doing something good." Reed's face hardened. "Good? How is kidnapping children good?" Miller pulled up a translated message that had been intercepted from collector communications. "They call themselves preservers of tomorrow. They believe they're saving these species by keeping samples of their young in suspended animation, like a living museum or a genetic backup." "That's insane," Reed muttered. "There's more," Miller continued. She showed another display, this one showing human DNA patterns compared to other species. "They specifically targeted us because human children are different. Our DNA shows more adaptation potential than any species they've encountered. They think we're special." Reed set his coffee down harder than necessary. "Special enough to steal our children." "They don't see it as stealing," Miller said, her voice tight with frustration. "In their records, they call it preservation. They keep the children in some kind of stasis, perfectly preserved until they decide the time is right to restore them." "Have they ever restored any?" Reed asked. Miller shook her head. "Not that I can find. They just keep collecting, building their living library of young ones from across the galaxy." The captain stood silent for a moment, processing this information. Why haven't other species fought back? "Fear," Miller answered, pulling up more data. "The collectors have incredibly advanced technology. Most species don't want to risk their children being harmed in a rescue attempt. So they just let it happen." Reed's expression darkened. "Well, they picked the wrong species this time. Humans don't let anyone cage our children." A sudden alert flashed across Miller's screens. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she pulled up the new information. "Captain," she said, her voice urgent, "I just decoded more of their communication patterns. I know why they took exactly 50 children from Colony 7. They have some kind of quota system. They believe they need 50 samples from each species to maintain viable preservation." Reed's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes, sir," Miller confirmed. "They'll be back. They'll keep coming until they have 50 children from every human colony they can find." The captain immediately moved to the wall communicator. "Bridge, send an emergency warning to all human colonies. Priority Alpha. And get me Earth Command again." He turned back to Miller. "Keep digging. Find out everything you can about where they might keep these children. If they think humanity will just stand by while they build their collection, they're about to learn how wrong they are." Miller nodded, already turning back to her screens. She paused for a moment, looking at a photo of the missing children. "Sir, what do we do if we find them in stasis? We don't have their technology." "Then we'll find someone who does," Reed answered firmly. "There are other species out there who must hate these collectors as much as we do. It's time humanity made some new friends, and some necessary enemies." The hunt for the collectors was about to become a galactic incident, and humanity was ready to show the stars just how far they would go to protect their own. The news spread across human space like wildfire. In every colony, on every planet, in every ship, parents held their children closer. The images from Colony 7 played on every screen. Empty playgrounds, abandoned toys, tearful parents, and with the news came something the galaxy had never seen before: human unity. Admiral Thomas Gray stood before the Emergency Council on Earth, his white uniform sharp against the dark wood of the ancient United Nations chamber. Representatives from every human nation and colony sat before him, their usual political differences forgotten in the face of this crisis. "The collectors believe we will react like other species," he said, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the room. They expect fear. They expect compliance. He paused, looking at the faces before him. Instead, they will learn about human anger. The chamber erupted in applause. Even the most peaceful nations had voted for immediate military action. Ships were already being gathered. The largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Aboard the Sentinel, Captain Reed received new orders. His ship would join 5 others under Admiral Gray's direct command. They would be the tip of the spear, the first to strike when the collectors were found. Message from Earth Command. Sir, Lieutenant Wilson called from her station. All colonies are reporting in. They're sending their fastest ships to join the fleet. Reed nodded, watching as his tactical display showed more and more friendly signals appearing. Green dots representing human ships filled the screen, moving to gather at the rally point. Even private vessels were volunteering, arming themselves and offering their services. In her office, Officer Miller worked with new energy. Help was pouring in from unexpected places. Other species, seeing humanity's response, began sharing information they had kept hidden out of fear. Captain, she called over the comm. You need to see this. Now. When Reed arrived, Miller's office screens showed messages from a dozen alien races. They're all saying the same thing, she explained. They want to help. The collectors took their children too, but none of them dared to fight back alone. One message stood out. It came from the Alteri, a species known for their advanced medical technology. They had lost 30 young ones to the collectors a decade ago. Now they offered their knowledge of stasis technology, crucial information for safely freeing the children. Another came from the Reth, master engineers who had tracked collector ships for years, but never acted. They provided detailed scanning frequencies, ways to detect the unique energy signatures of collector vessels. Admiral Gray's face appeared on the main screen. Captain Reed, Officer Miller, good news. We're not going in blind anymore. Half the galaxy hated these bastards but was too scared to move. Now they see us taking action. They're falling over themselves to help. They're not just helping us find our children, Miller realized. They want us to find theirs too. Exactly. Gray smiled grimly. We're not just fighting for humanity anymore. We're fighting for every child they've ever taken. The fleet will be ready in 6 hours. Be prepared to move on my signal. After the Admiral's image faded, Reed turned to Miller. How many? She knew what he meant. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, calculating. Based on the new information, over 1,000 children. Different species, different worlds, all in stasis somewhere. Reed's jaw tightened. Then we'll find them all. Every single one. The Sentinel's engines hummed as final preparations were made. In space around them, hundreds of ships moved into formation. Weapons were checked, crews took their stations, and plans were refined. The collectors had made 3 crucial mistakes. They had taken human children. They had underestimated humanity's response, and they had given dozens of angry species a chance to finally fight back. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, the galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet moved through space like a swarm of angry wasps. 500 ships strong, they followed the trail of energy signatures the Reth engineers had helped them track. Captain Reed stood on the Sentinel's bridge, watching the tactical display as it updated with new information. Contact. Lieutenant Wilson's voice cut through the quiet. Energy signature matching collector vessels, bearing 347. The display lit up with a red dot, then another, and another. 3 collector ships, Reed announced, just like the ones that hit Colony 7. He opened a channel to Admiral Gray's flagship. Admiral, we have them. All ships, battle stations. Gray's voice boomed through the fleet. But remember, we follow them. We don't engage unless we have to. They'll lead us to their base. The collector ships moved fast, but they didn't flee. They seemed almost curious about the human fleet, as if they couldn't understand why their prey would chase them. Officer Miller worked at her station, analyzing their movement patterns. Sir, they're not running away. They're circling, like they're studying us. Let them look, Reed said grimly. Let them see exactly what's coming for them. The chase lasted 3 days. The collector ships led them through an asteroid field, past a dying star, and finally into a region of space that seemed empty at first glance. But Miller's enhanced scans, using technology provided by their new allies, showed something else. There, she called out, hidden in the gravitational shadow of that gas giant. It's huge. The tactical display revealed their target, a massive space station, nearly hidden against the swirling colors of the gas giant behind it. It was built like a giant wheel, spinning slowly in space, with spokes reaching out from a central hub. The repository, Miller whispered, reading from her screens. That's what they call it. Their collection center. Admiral Gray's face appeared on the main screen. All ships, hold position. Stealth systems engage. Officer Miller, what can you tell us about that station? Miller's fingers flew over her console. It's bigger than anything we've seen before. Multiple layers of shielding. But the Alteri data is helping us scan through it. I'm detecting thousands of stasis pods. They're arranged in sections, sorted by species. Life signs? Reed asked. Yes, Miller said, her voice tight. All of them. Every child they've ever taken is in there, still alive in stasis. The human children from Colony 7 are in the newest section, but there are others. Some have been there for decades. Gray's expression hardened. How many security forces? Fewer than you'd expect, Miller replied. They've never needed many. No one's ever tried to attack them before. Reed studied the station's layout on his screen. They never expected anyone would dare. That's why they built this place like a museum instead of a fortress. Then let's make them regret that mistake, Gray said. All ships prepare for combat positions. But first, he paused, sending a signal to every ship in the fleet. We have guests who want to join us. New ships appeared from the darkness of space, vessels of different designs and sizes. The allies who had helped them track the collectors had sent their own forces. They wanted their children back too. 20 Altari medical ships, Miller reported, counting the newcomers. 15 Reth battlecruisers. More coming in. Total Allied fleet now at 700 vessels. Reed allowed himself a small smile. Send the message to all ships, human and allied. Target the station's shield generators first. Then we punch through to the central hub. The collectors are about to learn a lesson about taking things that don't belong to them. The fleet moved into attack formation, weapons powered up, crews ready. In the distance, the repository continued its slow spin, its defenders unaware that their day of reckoning had arrived. The hunt was over. The battle was about to begin. Before the attack could begin, the collectors made the first move. A transmission cut through all communication channels, reaching every ship in the combined fleet. A figure appeared on their screens. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Its large eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like whispers mixed with music. We are the preservers, it said. Why do you bring weapons to our sanctuary? Admiral Gray stood on his flagship's bridge, his voice firm as he responded. You know why we're here. You stole our children. And not just ours. You've taken children from every species in this fleet. The collector tilted its head, showing no sign of understanding their anger. Stolen? No. We preserve. We protect. We keep them safe from the chaos of your worlds. Captain Reed watched from the Sentinel's bridge, his hands gripping his chair's armrests. Officer Miller stood beside him, recording everything. These young ones are precious, the collector continued. They are the future. In our care, they will never know pain, never know fear, never know death. We offer them eternal preservation. You offer them eternal prison. Gray shot back. Those children have families. They have lives, dreams, futures of their own to choose. The collector's expression changed slightly, the first sign of emotion they had seen. Your species is young. You cannot understand. We have watched civilizations destroy themselves. We have seen species vanish in war and chaos. We prevent this. We preserve the innocent. Miller stepped forward. Sir, she said to Reed, they really believe they're doing the right thing. In their minds, they're saving these children. Reed nodded grimly. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Officer Miller. The collector spoke again. We have preserved samples of 52 species in this facility. Many of those species no longer exist in the galaxy. But here, their young ones live on. Perfect. Unchanging. Safe. Living isn't about being safe, Gray responded. It's about growing, changing, making choices, even mistakes. What you're doing isn't preservation, it's imprisonment. You are emotional, the collector said. This is why we do not seek permission. Parents are too attached. They cannot see the greater good. A new voice cut in. The leader of the Alteri ships. We have been silent for too long. You took our children 10 years ago. Every day since has been agony. Return them to us. More voices joined in, the Reth, and others. Species that had suffered in silence for years found their courage at last. The collector seemed to straighten. You cannot understand. The young ones are our responsibility now. We will protect them from your chaos, your wars, your mistakes. This discussion is finished. No, Reed said, standing up. It isn't. You think you're protecting these children. Look at your screens. Look at this fleet. Every ship out here is crewed by parents, brothers, sisters, friends, people who would die to protect their children. Real protection isn't about locking something away. It's about being willing to fight for it. The collector's image flickered. You would risk the children's safety. Attack this facility while they sleep in preservation. We're not the ones who put them at risk, Gray answered. This is your last chance. Return the children, all of them, or we're coming to take them back. Impossible, the collector said. The preservation must continue. If you attack, you risk everything. Wrong, Reed responded. You risk everything. Because you're about to learn why taking human children was the biggest mistake you've ever made. The collector's image vanished. Moments later, the station's defensive shields began to power up. All ships, Gray's voice rang out. Battle stations. The time for talking is over. The greatest rescue mission in human history was about to begin. The battle began with a flash of light that outshone the nearby gas giant. Hundreds of ships opened fire at once, their combined weapons creating a web of energy that struck the repository's shields. Shield strength at 80%, Miller reported from her station on the Sentinel. The Reth were right. Their defenses aren't as strong as they look. They never expected a real fight. Captain Reed watched as the Allied fleet moved in perfect formation. Admiral Gray had divided them into 3 groups. The main attack force hammering the shields, the Alteri medical ships hanging back safely, and a small strike team led by the Sentinel, waiting for their moment. Shields at 60%. Miller called out. They're trying to adapt, but they can't handle this much firepower. The repository's defenses fought back, sending out waves of automated drones. But these too showed the collector's inexperience with real combat. The drones flew in straight lines, easy targets for the battle-hardened human gunners. Shields at 40%. 30. They're failing. Admiral Gray's voice cut through the chaos. Strike team, prepare for insertion. Captain Reed, you have your mission. Reed nodded to his crew. All hands, prepare for close approach. Security teams to the shuttle bay. He turned to Miller. You're with me, officer. We'll need your knowledge of their systems. The Sentinel broke from the main fleet, leading 5 other ships toward the weakening shields. Behind them, the battle raged on, keeping the repository's defenders busy. Shields down, Miller shouted. We have an opening. The strike team ships shot forward, diving through the gap in the defenses. They headed straight for the central hub, where scans showed the stasis pods were kept. Landing bay spotted. Lieutenant Wilson called from the helm, taking us in. The Sentinel shuddered as it landed inside the repository. Security teams poured out, led by Reed and Miller. The inside of the station was beautiful in a cold way, all white walls and soft lights, more like a museum than a prison. They met their first collectors in the main corridor. The tall aliens tried to stop them with stun weapons, but human combat training proved superior. Within minutes, the way to the central control room was clear. "This way," Miller called, following her scanner. "The stasis control center should be here." The doors slid open to reveal a vast circular room. Screens covered the walls, showing thousands of stasis pods arranged in neat rows. Each pod held a sleeping child, perfectly preserved in time. "Get to work," Reed ordered as his team secured the room. "Find out how to wake them safely." Miller's fingers flew over the alien controls, applying everything the Alteri had taught them about stasis technology. "I've got it. The collector's systems are actually very simple. They never expected anyone to access them." "How long to wake them all?" "It has to be done in stages," Miller explained. "Too fast could be dangerous. But I can start with the newest additions, the children from Colony 7. Reed nodded. "Do it. Then work your way backward through all of them." The first pods began to open, releasing their precious cargo. Medical teams rushed forward with blankets and supplies. Children blinked awake, confused but unharmed, exactly as they had been when taken. "Captain," Miller called, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at these dates. Some of these children have been here for decades. We're not just saving our children. We're bringing back sons and daughters that worlds thought were lost forever." Outside, the battle was winding down. The collectors, seeing their preservation chamber being emptied, finally surrendered. They had never understood that their good intentions meant nothing compared to the love of parents for their children. One by one, the pods opened. One by one, the children woke up. And in ships throughout the fleet, crews wept as they received the news they had prayed for. "The children are safe. All of them. We're bringing them home." 1 month after the battle at the repository, Captain Reed stood at a window in Earth's orbital station, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Each vessel carried children being returned to their homeworlds, along with families coming to reclaim little ones they had thought lost forever. "It's quite a sight, isn't it?" Officer Miller appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee, their tradition now. Some of these species haven't spoken to each other in centuries. Now they're working together, helping each other get their children home. Reed took one of the cups, smiling as he watched an Alteri ship dock nearby. "How many so far?" 1,243 children rescued, Miller reported. Some had been in stasis for over 50 years. The oldest ones. She paused, still amazed by the fact they're being reunited with their grandchildren. Below them, in the station's main hall, happy chaos reigned. Families of a dozen different species mingled, sharing stories, helping each other navigate the reunion process. The sound of children laughing, human and alien alike, filled the air. Admiral Gray approached them, looking more relaxed than they'd ever seen him. The last group from Colony 7 just arrived. Every single child accounted for, safe and sound. "And the collectors?" Reed asked. "They're learning," Gray replied. "We've stationed observers at their facility. They're not allowed to preserve anything larger than a plant now. Sometimes good intentions need firm boundaries." A small commotion drew their attention. A group of Reth children, just awakened from stasis last week, were playing with human kids from Colony 7. Despite their different appearances, they had invented some kind of game involving hopping and clapping that seemed to work for both species. "The galaxy's changing," Miller observed. "All these species that never worked together before, now they have a connection. We all fought for the same thing." "Speaking of change," Gray said, "the Galactic Council sent a message. They're creating a new position, someone to oversee relations between species, especially regarding the protection of children. He looked meaningfully at Reed. They want a human for the job, someone who's proven they'll fight for what's right, no matter whose children are in danger. Reed raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting? You've earned it, James, Gray said. The Sentinel will need a new captain, of course. But I can think of someone qualified for that position, too. He nodded toward Miller. Before they could discuss it further, a small voice called out, "Captain Reed." A little girl from Colony 7 ran up to them, her parents following with warm smiles. Reed knelt down to her level, remembering her face from the rescue mission. "Hello, Amy. How are you feeling?" "Good," she beamed. "I made new friends. And guess what? When I grow up, I'm gonna be a spaceship captain too. I'm gonna help people, just like you did." Reed glanced at Miller, who was trying not to laugh at his touched expression. "That's a fine goal, Amy. Just remember, being a captain isn't about fighting. It's about protecting those who need help." "I know," Amy said seriously. "That's why I want to do it." As the girl ran back to her friends, Reed stood up, making his decision. "Tell the council I accept, Admiral. Someone needs to make sure nothing like this happens again." "Good man," Gray nodded. "The galaxy's changing, and humanity helped change it. Not with weapons or threats, but by showing everyone what it means to stand up for what's right." They watched as more ships arrived, bringing more families together. The stars had seen many things over the billions of years they had shown, but they had never seen anything quite like this. The day when humanity's love for their children had brought the galaxy together and taught everyone a lesson about what really matters. In the end, the collectors had been right about one thing. Children were precious and needed to be preserved, but not in pods or stasis chambers, in the hearts and lives of those who loved them, free to grow, learn, and become whatever they dreamed of being. The galaxy would never forget the day humans had taught them that simple truth.